This webinar features strategies found in Christine Fonseca's new book, Healing the Heart, Helping Your Child Thrive After Trauma. This book is available from Proofrock Press at proofrock.com, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or your local bookseller. All right. The objective today is we're going to be talking about this idea of overcoming toxic or helping children overcome toxic stress, trauma. Initially, we Christine Fonseca, who I'm introducing in a moment, wrote this book thinking of the idea of what are the effects of trauma and toxic stress, and then as parents and as counselors and as school personnel, how do we help children uh, thrive after experiencing trauma or excessive stress. That has taken on obviously new meaning in our current world situation with the COVID-19 virus and all of the things that we are doing to try to improve the health of our neighbors and keep everyone safe and help our kids understand what's going on. So in order to help us to understand all that, I'd like to introduce Christine Fonseca. She was a school psychologist for more than 17 years. She's taught parenting classes for more than a decade. She's an award-winning nonfiction and fiction author. She's written 9 books for Proofrock Press, including the very popular Emotional Intensity in Gifted Students and The Caring Child, Raising Empathetic and Emotionally Intelligent Children. If you would like to see any of Christine's books, you can go to proofrock.com and type in Fonseca in the search box, and you'll get all 9 of her fantastic books. So, Christine, thank you for coming.
I'm so happy to be here, and especially on such an important topic like trauma at this time.
So yeah, so your book, Healing the Heart. I'm actually, and you and I kind of talked about this a little bit before. So Healing the Heart, it has different sections, and
Mhm.
the first couple of sections are really focused on the impact of adverse childhood experiences on kids, how that can have behavioral impacts, how trauma can impact even brain development among kids. And so you kind of set up, okay, here's the problem, here's what we need to do to help kids with toxic stress and trauma. I'm going to gloss over
Mhm.
some of that stuff because I think with the COVID situation that we're in and that sort of thing, it's well, enough of that talk. let's let's talk about some solutions. And I know the rest of your book really is talking about building safety for kids and helping kids become resilient. And so maybe you can talk about some of your thoughts about what we can be doing now to help kids who are dealing with this stress.
Absolutely. So one of the big premises I talk about in the book is that for all of the damage that toxic stress can cause neurologically in terms of how we function in our social emotional domains in particular, and the ramifications that has for our physical health and for our behavioral health, there's things we can do for all of that that help rebuild and kind of reintegrate the brain. And as I think about this global pandemic that we're in and kind of the trauma that undoubtedly globally we're all experiencing in real time right now, we're experiencing the event and then we'll have the impact of that event as the event fades. And I start to think about what can we do right now. I do center on several things that I feel like if we did right now, we could start to mitigate some of the potential harmful effect of the trauma. So things like establishing safety, and that may sound super weird right now, given the scope and nature of the event that's occurring and how significant it is. But there are things that we can do in our homes with our children to start to establish safety, focusing on connections and relationships. And that may sound weird too at a time when we're all being asked to socially isolate, but really looking at that difference between physical isolation and social isolation. How can we still connect even though we're doing it from a distance? And then how can we build really actively within our home settings? How can we really start focusing in on the social emotional learning skills and building those skills so that we can have that buffer in terms of our long-term impact of toxic stress and trauma?
Oh, that makes sense. What do you have some for kids?
Mhm.
How do you create social interaction for kids would you suggest Zoom or
Yeah, Zoom's gotten a lot of bad press, I know, because of some of the safety issues, and there are some considerations. There's lots of things you can do to make Zoom a more safe platform, however. And so going to their website, taking a look at what their recommendations are would be one way, but certainly things like Zoom can do it. You can do some online gaming. Normally, I don't recommend a lot of online gaming for kids because there are some negative impacts of that, but there are some positive ones too, which are this ability to socialize. Looking for different kinds of actual games that you guys can play online. I had a couple of teenage friends of my kids who played chess online, and they each had a chessboard and they each told which one to move, and they had this great game of chess as they were just hanging out online talking. And so it's looking for these opportunities to get really creative. I even like things like old-fashioned mailing letters. Let's write some letters let's write them to some doctors, like to give them, tell them we're thinking about them. Just some of these things we don't think of that my generation certainly did when we were cooped up in the house for whatever reason, but these are things we can do now. And then looking for creative outlets. And so maybe, if you're a writer like me and you think kind of in story form, maybe you and a friend each take a chapter, and I write a chapter, and we'll do it on Google Docs so that you can see the chapter I wrote, and then you're going to write the chapter, and then we're going to hop on a Zoom call and we're going to talk about our chapters. I mean, there's all kinds of ways we can utilize these things like storytelling and games and interactions to be interacting still. We still get the happy hits in our brain. Our brain still feels like it's connecting socially. We're just not doing it in person the same way as we used to.
Yeah, well, in thinking about that, we're all stuck together
Mhm.
in homes. And by the way, here in Austin, Texas, we're shelter in place, and so
So are we in California.
if if you hear any children screaming, you know why. Um, so in your book, you talk about this idea that the overload of stress, particularly over a period of time, sort of can, with some folks, move us from having adaptive reactions to that
Mhm.
stress to maladaptive
Mhm.
reactions, and then to a third level of just the toxic sort of reactions to stress. And
Yep.
I imagine as parents, we're modeling how we're handling the stress. Can you
100%.
talk about how some of the ways that we can be more adaptive about dealing with the stress that we're experiencing?
Yeah, I think the very first thing us as adults that we all need to be aware of is this is really a grief process that we're all having right now. And in trauma literature, I would liken it to traumatic death. And so while we may not personally be dealing with death per se, the entire globe right now is dealing with the death of the world we knew. That's just the bottom line. It's not going to be the world it was when we emerged from this. We are all undergoing substantive change, and there's a death associated with that, and there's grief associated with that. And so as adults, we need to get super clear on our own emotional roller coasters that we're on, and start to mitigate some of that for ourselves so that we can, yes, model it to our kids, but also just so we can be available to our kids to be able to answer their questions. They are looking to us as to how to respond. If we are glued to the 24-hour media cycle and just obsessively looking at that because we're scared, and that's just a fear reaction and a way that we feel like we can control things, our kids are also going to pick up on that and be equally afraid. It's not that there's nothing to be afraid of here. There are things, but we have to start thinking of it in terms of what we can control and what we can't. In some of my earlier books, I'm thinking of 101 Success Secrets in particular. I have this technique called a hula hoop technique. And it means this. Imagine there's a hula hoop on the floor and you're standing in the middle of the hula hoop. Everything inside of the hula hoop is in your control. Everything outside of the hula hoop is out of your control. And so you need to just learn to let that go. So in the case of this situation, everything related to if I'm going to catch COVID, if I'm not going to catch COVID, what's the outcome going to be? Am I going to have a job? Am I not going to have a job? All that stuff is actually out of your control. Don't spend precious energy obsessing over that stuff. What's in the control is how you show up every day, how you think about everything, how you manage your emotions, what you do with this time, what you choose not to do with this time because you're preserving your energy. All of that lives inside the hula hoop. What all of us have to get really good at right now is understanding outside the hula hoop, inside the hula hoop. Where's my locus of control? What can I do right now in this moment? And just take it moment by moment and be willing to kind of acquiesce to that and live to that.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I'm looking at the discussion that's happening in the Q&A section here, and there's Laurie is complimenting your idea of the what she says is during Hurricane Harvey, the kids were able to get out and do public service and community service, and that gave them a sense of, well, this
Huge.
I'm making a difference, and she said she liked your idea of writing the letters to the healthcare
Mhm.
workers, and Jennifer
Good.
then mentioned videos, thinking everyone is also one, but it was something that
Absolutely.
you had brought this up before when we were talking offline, having kids focus on the heroes in the community and who those
Yep.
heroes are, and giving thanks for those heroes. Can you
Yep.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that can really help shift ourselves, like when we're stuck in negative thinking or we're stuck in fear, or some of those places where we go in a situation like this, one of the things that can really help is when we're able to shift our focus to something bigger than ourselves. And excuse my husband in the background. We're all working at home.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
I know.
yeah. So shifting our focus a little bit. And so in the case of heroes, who's heroic? Am I heroic? What can I do personally that's heroic right now today? If I am a parent, maybe the thing that I can do that's heroic right now today is to give my child a hug, because they just need a little extra of my time. And even though I'm working from home, they still need me. They need me to be present. Maybe the way my child can be heroic right now today is to put the dishes in the dishwasher for me to help out. And that's a super heroic thing. And so it's not just, superheroes don't have to be in the form of Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman. They're fabulous, but we all can be that too. And we can do that in little tiny ways in our own home. Doing laundry for mom because she looked like she needed some help, bringing dad a glass of water because he's been on the phone all day long and I'm imagining that he must be parched. Like, so I'm going to bring him some water. Those little tiny things. And then at the end of the day, take stock of that. How did I show up as a hero today? Who did I recognize that was heroic in my life today? What did I see on media that looked heroic today? And sharing that as a family can all be ways to orient ourselves and kind of remind ourselves that we're all in this together, that we all have shared responsibility, and together we're all going to get through this too.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. It's a little bit like that idea of the family as each person has a role, and there's
100%.
yeah, and you feel connected as a result.
Hmm.
Um,
And it's something we've kind of gotten away from a little bit in our modern world. And so this is just that great reset opportunity to look for ways that the entire family unit can work together and have meaningful contribution.
That perfect sense. Thank you. Thank you. I was talking to my wife before we did this webinar, and I was thinking one of the challenges that you are faced with as someone who's talking on this topic is that right now in Austin, Texas, I'm grateful and fortunate that this has not impacted my life other than the structure of staying home and
Mhm.
and those kind of things. And my mother is healthy and all of that, and taking it as seriously. So for me, this is more of an abstract sort of, well, I'm sheltered in place. But for many people, there is
Mhm.
death and there is illness as a
It's
result of
very
this.
real. Hmm.
How do we talk to kids about those kind of topics, especially when they're impacting their life? A loved one
Yeah.
is.
It, death is a scary subject for most of us to go there. Like, most of us don't think we have to go there until some mythical thing in the future, right? But here's the thing, right? Death is permanent. Death is, it's going to impact all of us. It's irreversible. And so when we talk with kids, we're looking for those opportunities when they can understand those concepts. Really, really young kids don't understand permanence. They don't. A preschooler, an infant, they don't understand permanence. So they'll get a sense that something has changed, but they're not impacted in the same way. About the time we turn 5 or 6, that starts significantly changing, and we start really beginning to understand loss and permanence. And when something's gone, it could be gone forever. And then the worry monster hits. And I think that's where parents get really afraid to have these conversations, because their child is starting to demonstrate some emotional distress, because now they're worried. Oh my gosh, are you going to get sick? Am I going to get sick? Are we all going to die? What's going to happen? Right? These are super, super scary things. And so It's important to give the information that your child is asking for, but don't force it down their throat if they're not asking, kind of thing. Kind of be on the lookout out for that. And then to really start with an answer, but an answer that's developmentally appropriate and only as much detail as they need, so that we don't force them to confront their fears too quickly if they're not ready. The other thing, at the same time that we're having some very real conversations, we need to help them establish what I call safety, and not just physical safety, but psychological safety. We live in a scary world, regardless of this pandemic. This reminds us, this pandemic has served to remind us of how scary our world can actually be. But the scary part was actually always there. And so it's establishing psychological safety enables us to feel safe despite the fact that we don't know a lot, and despite the fact that we can perish, any one of us, at any time for any reason, which can feel super scary. Helping your children develop some lifestyle skills that kind of keep them attached to their body, for lack of a better way to say it. When we are afraid, when all of that mortality idea gets super triggered, we tend to disconnect from our bodies. And so our brains operate and our bodies operate, and they don't match. And if you ever wondered if you're disconnected, think about the last time maybe you drove to the store, if you're a parent, and you have no idea how you actually got there. You did it so automatically that you don't, the next thing you're really conscious of in your thinking is being at the store or passing the store, because that's not where you normally go and you just drove right past it. Those are indications that you're actually not very well connected. You're starting to dissociate a little bit, which is a very normal stress response. Doing things like mindfulness, meditation, yoga, dance parties, like have a dance party in the middle of the day. Turn on Just Dance or whatever you got, blast the radio, and everybody just act silly and dance and move, fully move their bodies. Something as simple as that helps keep us reconnected to our bodies, really connected to here and now. And when we are that kind of connected, then we can start dealing with these really difficult topics from a much better place of resilience and a better place of strength.
Yeah, yeah. It's a silly example, but just that little breathe app on the Apple Watch,
Mm-hmm.
that just
Oh, it's
one
the
minute where
best.
you reconnect with things.
100%.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know. Did you see the Queen Elizabeth
Mm-hmm.
video?
I did. I
That,
did.
I mean, boy, if you didn't have tears after that thing,
No.
that was great. But circling back to, even in that video,
Mm-hmm.
this circles back to your point about the finding heroes. She even
Yeah.
does that in that video,
Yep.
finding the bright spots in this very dark.
And that's how we get established hope, right? The real danger in this, beyond the very real physical dangers of the pandemic, is the danger of our fear, and the danger of losing hope, and the danger of what comes next, and this uncertain world that we've all kind of been plunged into. And so doing things like, if you don't already do some sort of gratitude work every day, where you just, you're counting your blessings every day, make that a practice every single day. What's one good thing that happened today? What's one bright thing? When you find yourself as a parent feeling overwhelmed, take a few breaths, sit down, and say, what's one thing I'm thankful for right now in this moment? What's one thing I can celebrate right now in this moment? I guarantee you there's always something. You might have to search really hard some days. That's just a fact. But there is something to celebrate and something to be thankful for. And the quicker we can learn to kind of flex between feeling what's real for you right now, this moment, and then shifting into some other feeling that you want to have, it's that shifting part that's so important. Whether we're super, super happy or super, super sad, whether we're all stuck in the middle of this global pandemic or it's kind of normal life, learning how to shift between your emotions is the key, whether it's dealing with trauma and getting to post-recovery, or it's developing empathy, or some of these other kinds of things that I've written on. The key is really around learning how to recognize what you feel right now, this moment, and learning how to shift into kind of a more elevated, positive feeling if that's not where you're at.
Makes sense. I'm going to shift a little bit I
Mhm.
want to encourage everyone to, everyone's been so nice and so complimentary. Jana mentioned doing TikTok videos
Yeah.
for
Oh,
healthcare
those are
workers.
great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh, it was a great idea. But also, if you have questions, please put those questions down on the Q&A box, and please, those of you who are reading through those, upvote any of the questions that you'd like to have answered. I did get a few questions via email before the session, so I'd like to
Mhm.
talk to a few of those. One, I'm pretty sure this was a school counselor, was asking, what are some ways you feel are most effective in reaching out to families? I'm a school counselor and I'm making calls, emails, etc. But I would love new ideas and resources to share, especially ones that can calm their fears.
Yeah, so make some TikTok videos. That's not a bad idea at all. But do some kinds of video chats with the kids so that they can see you, you can see them. You guys can do some deep breathing together. If you wanted to, depending on your level of commitment, you could have a once or twice a week mindfulness check-in, right, with some students that have kind of been brought to your attention. If your district hasn't already set up some sort of a hotline where parents can get in touch with a mental health professional if they need to for their children, encourage your district to kind of set that up as a way, because that could be a way that you could become aware of kids who might need something. I think the biggest challenge a lot of our districts are facing is if a child does not have internet access at all, and does not have a phone. And we do have families for whom that's true. And so that becomes more difficult. Some ways we can look at that are what are some agencies that are going out and supporting within your specific town that are supporting homeless youth or homeless families or foster youth and foster families, and then how can you get connected with them? Is there a way? Is there an agency in your town that's helping provide internet access, not just in terms of a device, but in terms of the actual access to the internet, so that you can start bridging that gap? But looking for all of those ways, things like this particular situation just kind of uncovers the different inequities that exist within our culture, our larger culture, and looking for ways as a mental health professional to try to bridge that to the greatest capacity possible is going to be really important right now.
Mm-hmm. I, I was, every now and then I start to get choked up thinking about what schools are doing. It's
Yeah.
just,
It's amazing some of the things
uh,
they're doing. I have a dear friend, I have lots of friends who work in a variety of different school systems, and I've seen everything from I had one team that I worked with who works with really significant levels of need in terms of the children, and they put together a series of resource videos that demonstrate how to de-escalate certain behaviors and those kinds of things. The organization that I work with in my day job, Collaborative Learning Solutions, we put out daily SEL lessons through our page, our social media presence and our website and whatever, Mondays through Fridays for anyone to take. We just open sourced a bunch of stuff so that people could just start working on some of these skills with kids.
yeah, right. My sister is in administration for a district,
Mm-hmm.
and they are using city buses to get
Yeah.
reduced and free lunches out. They've set up the school
Yep.
buses as Wi-Fi centers
Oh,
to the
hubs.
poor
What a
neighbor. Yeah,
brilliant idea. That's
yeah,
brilliant.
yeah. Just incredible amount of
Yeah.
work that they've been doing. If we get out at the end of this thing, and this country doesn't have a new appreciation for the work that teachers are doing
Yeah,
and the
no
sacrifice.
joke.
Yeah, it's
For all kinds of people that we didn't appreciate in our system, all the
oh,
people
for sure.
who keep it running, right? I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
So I'm going to shoot down through some of the questions here,
Hmm.
and one had to do with how do you, because I know that this particular asker is dealing with a 3-year-old. So you've got, the verbal
Young
skills and
children.
understanding are limited. How do you help a 3-year-old deal with emotions, especially if it affecting appetite
Sure.
and
First and foremost, you have to help establish an emotional vocabulary, because you can't talk about something you can't label. And that's the biggest issue facing a lot of our toddlers. They just don't have language to support what they're feeling. And so something as simple as taking cards or small pieces of paper and coming up with some basic words: love, hate, angry, sad, these things with emojis on them. And then, what does it feel like in my body? When I'm sad, what does it feel like in my body? Going to YouTube, if you don't have Inside Out, the movie, for example, but going to YouTube and seeing clips from Inside Out can help explain the different emotions in very young language. Reading a book together and talking about the characters and what they might be feeling. So that would be the first part in terms of establishing emotional literacy. And then partnering with that, I would really get into mindfulness with this kid. And so really starting to practice, what does deep breathing feel like? What does it physically feel like in my body to be calm? And so when they're afraid and they start escalating, you immediately coach them to get them back to a state of calm, and then pull out those cards you just made and said, what are you feeling right now? Because in addition to having limited vocabulary, they don't have a lot of tools in their toolbox to show you what they're feeling. So tantruming behavior can mean everything from I'm angry, I'm afraid, I'm sad, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm sleepy, I want you to pay attention to me, I need more attention, I've watched too much TV. Like, it could mean all of those things. And so as soon as we can get that vocabulary going, then we can start to figure out what these behaviors really mean. And then once we know what they mean, we know how to address it.
No, are the learning, sorry, the social and emotional learning
Mhm.
materials that you mentioned, is there a link to that, or how?
For that, I actually think I talk about that in one of my books. I've lost track which book I talk about it in, but
Okay.
yeah, I can certainly put some resources together for you, Joel, if you want any on some of this stuff easily. Just
Yeah, yeah, that might be good. I'll tell you what we could do, Christine, is after following this, and it usually takes me 2 or 3 days.
Mhm.
I send out a follow-up email with a link to the webinar recording
Yeah,
and also a certificate of attendance for those people who actually, attended. I could
yeah,
also put a link into any free resources that you might
excellent.
want to share
Excellent.
with the
Yeah, I'll pull
audience.
some together because I have some things, so I can pull some together definitely and get that to you and get
Okay,
that to
good.
all of you.
Yeah. And we had one question about, obviously, with stress being sort of ever present for
Mhm.
some families in particular, what are some grounding examples of grounding techniques for kids of different ages?
Yeah. So, as silly as dance party sounded, that's actually is one, because part of what's happening with this lack of grounding or this dissociation is that disconnect between mind and body again. And so dancing enables us to actually feel all, like, from the tips of our toes to the tips of our fingers and everything in between. And that grounds us back. Mindfulness is another really good one that's going to ground us back. And when we do mindfulness, doing a specific type. So doing the type where when they're sitting on a chair, okay, how do you feel sitting in the chair? How do your sit bones feel right now? How do your feet feel right now? How does your hands feel right now? And really looking at each parts of the body parts, and saying, what are they doing right now? All of those kinds of things can help us ground. Taking a moment every day to check in with our bodies to see, like, where am I in space right now? What am I doing right now? And I think if we can build a routine around that, we're going to start experiencing a lot more grounding. One of the techniques I use overall for anxiety is called ROAR. And it stands for relax, orient, attune, and release. And the grounding part comes in the attunement in particular, and comes in the orient. And so those two middle parts. So relaxing, that's your mindfulness will get you there. There's some other breathing strategies that can relax you, but the orient and the attune is really about locking into the present moment. What's going on right now, this minute? What's my need right now, this minute? And not looking too far into the past or into the future, because typically anxiety and stress is happening because we're projecting into the future, or we're obsessing and ruminating over the past.
So I've got one question that I, I have no idea what the answer is, because I mean,
Uh-oh.
well, I think my parents probably could have been in this with anyway. Uh, do you have suggestions on how to help teenage girls as an alienated parent? So we're probably a teenager we're dealing with.
Yeah. Depends on what the issues are, really, right? So kids and adolescents don't want a whole lot to do with their parents to begin with, right? And so now they're all locked in a room together. Brilliant, right? Who thought of that idea? Um, I think this is a great opportunity to reconnect as a family, because as much as kids and adolescents are pushing away adults to form their relationships with the tribe outside of our tribe, right? The tribe outside. They also still really need their parents. But I think the mistake sometimes we make as parents is we are remembering our kid when they were younger, and we're not locking into who they are now, and we're not asking questions as though they are kind of mini adults right now, and we're forgetting that they have some really unique opinions, and we might have a lot of judgments about those opinions, and when you're all locked in a room together, that's just going to get explosive pretty fast. And so taking a step back and looking for the commonality. What do we have in common right now? What can I learn from my kid right now? And then do I hope they can learn from me? How can they contribute right now in a way that's meaningful, that makes sense? And then really understanding that right now in particular, all of these emotional cadences have this overlying reality of the pandemic and our fears around that pandemic. And so kind of locking back into that whole concept of we're all in this together. So we have to figure out how to navigate this together, and I'm going to need your help for that. And
I like that. I like that.
just starting that dialogue. And it won't be comfortable and it won't be easy. One of the things I said to you, Joel, at the beginning before we started this is right now, every single person on the planet's trauma story is alive and well. So whatever traumas you had prior to this, yeah, it all came back. Doesn't matter how much work you did on it. Doesn't matter how much you had it resolved. All that's back. And so we're all operating from that space, and we all need to give ourselves a ridiculous amount of grace right now. What we think is happening is not what's happening. Like if somebody pops off at you, odds are, sure, they may be a jerk prior to this, but that's probably not why they're popping off right now. It's just made it worse.
It's like rising to some sort of meta level and thinking outside of
lots and lots of grace. Like just assume that if somebody's showing up in a way that's surprising to you, or maybe not surprising but worse than usual, like we're all got our stuff. We all have stuff. We all have a story. None of us know what that story really is. And so we're all going to offer a lot of grace right now.
Those of you this is a very special group of attendees. I've never had this happen before, where there's just a lot of information sharing in the Q&A box, and there's a lot of compliments and just nice people trying to reach out and help. So I really appreciate it. It means that I'm sorting to get to the questions. I'm sorting through a lot of great information, including that there's a link to the resources that you guys have posted on the website.
Oh yeah, somebody just put that up. Thank you, whoever. I just saw that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So if I've missed a question here, I do apologize. I'm trying to go through here, but I'm talking and I'm looking, and this has never happened before. I've had 50 comments, so I apologize. And okay, so here's one that is certainly coming up. And again, the fact that parents are now having to teach their kids at home, they're doing online learning and all that kind of stuff, it is going to make a lot of grateful parents when the teachers are back online. I mean, in August,
in person,
hopefully, but there is the one question: what do you do, or can you give some maybe strategies or suggestions if you've got a kid who just doesn't want to do online learning and you're stuck at home? And
honestly, I wouldn't push it right now. There are lots of ways for people to learn information. If the school is providing, it depends on how your schools and districts are set up, right? So if they have a dedicated time with dedicated assignments and your kid's just not doing them, I'd reach out to the teacher that assigned those things and say, hey, what's a workaround? Like, what else can we do to demonstrate this knowledge or this mastery? If it's more that a lot of the onus was put on the parent, so here's a bunch of resources, try to cover this stuff as best you can, then I wouldn't fight it. What are some other ways that we can learn? There's lots to be learned from playing a game. There's social skills within that. And right now, the name of the game should not be content. It really shouldn't. It really needs to be our social emotional health. This is a great opportunity to fine tune those skills, to practice problem solving that's real world problem solving. In 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, we can turn around and apply that problem solving to some math problem or some scientific problem that we need to solve. But right now, if your kid's not available to do that, that's okay. Just recognize that this is grief, this is stress, this is trauma. Welcome to it. That's what it is. That's okay. Let's see what else we can do instead. Is there a creative project we can jump into? Is there, if we're studying reading and my kid doesn't like the book or the passageway that we're supposed to be reading, and so I'm getting World War II going on or World War III going on at home over it, discontinue that and find a book that they are interested in and have a conversation around that. Reading's reading, still going to improve the skill. And so it's really looking for opportunities to do something different. If, pretty much every artist in existence right now is tutoring for free online. Like pretty much all of them have something that you can tap into. Tap into some of those things. If you're stir crazy, hop on the Getty website and like go explore a museum, like, and talk about that. Have different kinds of conversations with your kids. It may feel like more work initially, and by no means do I want to put more work on you, but it could be exactly the antidote that you guys need that calm down all of the behavior.
That's great. Thank you. And
Mhm.
Christina, before uh, I know there's a lot of questions, but I also promised everybody this would be 40-45 minutes, and but let me ask you this, and the answer may be no, and feel free to say
Mhm.
it's not anymore. I had asked you originally to maybe read a passage from
Mhm.
your book and
Yeah.
select a reading. Is that still appropriate given the
I
direction of the?
can. What I'd like to do instead of reading it verbatim is just tell this one little story that's
Mm,
in the book, if that's okay with you.
yeah, yeah.
So somebody had mentioned Hurricane Harvey, and I happened to be in Houston to speak to a group of gifted educators 1 month, almost to the day, after Hurricane Harvey hit. And originally, that training for educators had nothing in it around trauma or any of that. And I got off the plane and I could still smell the damp air. And I got into my car and I'm driving over the highway that's half blocked off because of the damage that had been done. And I knew in that moment, and staring at people with their vacant eyes looking back at me, that I absolutely had to address trauma. So I do this 1-day training. It went well. These were fantastic teachers. We talk a lot about what had happened, and I go home and I drop off my car, and I'm now in the shuttle van on my way back to the airport. And I start up a conversation. I'm the only person in the van, and so I start up a conversation with the driver, and I asked the driver, how she was doing, and she was a beautiful human, and she's like, "Oh, I'm fine," kind of like we all do. And I stopped and I go, "No, really, how are you?" And she proceeds to tell me her experiences with Harvey and her experiences with the rain and having her house float away and losing everything and having to deal with insurance adjusters who want receipts for things that are literally floating down some river somewhere, and kind of the audacity of that. And as we talked and she told me about her kids, what I found so amazing, and the part I wanted to share, is she proceeded to tell me how she had her children watch the news reports from Hurricane Maria that had happened in Puerto Rico. And she looked at her kids and she told her kids, that's what loss actually looks like. We still have a roof over our heads because we're at a family member's house. I still have a job I can go to. Those people have absolutely nothing. What should we do to help those people? And in her darkest hour, she rallied her family together to collect resources to send to Puerto Rico to people who had it worse. And I thought, holy cow, like that's the message that the whole world needs. There's always somebody hurting more. And if we can turn our attention away from our own needs, not ignore them, not pretend we're not in pain. Of course we're in pain, but also in the midst of that pain, find something to do for another human being. That's how hope's born. That's how resiliency's born. That's how we all get through this together. So
Oh,
that's the thing I
wonderful.
wanted to share.
Well, that was very sweet. I love that. Um, let
Never
me
forget it. It was very touching.
that's very touching. Let me share a few things with the audience. First, I'm going to give Christine's contact information to you guys. There were more questions than we could,
And please feel free to reach out. I will answer every question that I get.
That's very sweet of you. The book that we were originally going to be talking about was Healing the Heart, and it is relevant. I mean,
Hmm.
that last half of the whole book is about
Tons of strategies.
the strategies for thriving after
Yeah.
toxic stress and trauma. And then this is Christine's contact information. And what I will do is I will make sure and leave this up for a little bit, just so you guys uh, can write that down. And also, if you go to the Proof Rock Press website and just look up Christine by name, we have an author page, and it has the contact information there as well. And I can provide her contact information
Mhm.
in the follow-up that I send to you, all of you guys, at the end. So I'm sorry, we've come to the end of our webinar. This has been a marvelous conversation. I'm so appreciative of everyone who showed up and entered comments and suggestions. This is the sweetest group of people that I've had. They've all been good, but this one's been a particularly nice one. And
Because
Christine,
we're all in this together, and
yeah,
I think your audience gets that, right? We're all in this together. We're here to support each other, and together is how we get through it. Nobody gets through this kind of situation alone.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Christine. I will send everyone your contact information if
Excellent.
for some of these questions we
Thank you
couldn't
all
handle.
for
And
being here.
thank you, Christine. Thank you.